Graham Bodie is professor of integrated marketing communication in the School of Journalism and New Media at the University of Mississippi. He is recognized as an international expert on listening and the social cognitive underpinnings of human communicative behavior, having authored over 90 published papers. His productivity has placed him in the top 1% of published communication studies scholars. Dr. Bodie's research has been funded by the National Science Foundation and the U.S. Army, and he regularly appears in local and national media outlets on issues relevant to listening and close relationships. He currently serves as Chief Listening Officer for Listen First Project, a nonprofit dedicated to bringing people into conversation despite differences. Welcome to the Water Cooler Hangout podcast. I'm your host, Bob Poole. For over 45 years, I've been helping sales and marketing leaders and entrepreneurs grow and prosper by creating extraordinary experiences for their customers. Here at the Water Cooler Hangout, we chat with influential and successful guests who share their real-life stories about their careers and companies. Their successes, failures, and stories will resonate with you and leave you wanting to hear more. We'll learn how all of us are connected and how we share the same kind of challenges, fears, wants, needs, and dreams. My sincerest desire is that you hear something today that helps you create the job, the business, and the life you want and deserve. Hi, Graham. Welcome to the Water Cooler Hangout again.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
It's been almost a year, which we just talked about off camera.
Well, like I said, the calendar's better than my memory. It doesn't feel like that long. But yeah, it's good to be back.
Yeah, I know. I talk to people and I'll say something like, last year. And then suddenly I think, no, it wasn't last year. It was the year before. We lost a year.
Right. We lost the whole year.
So you're still involved, though, with the Listen First project?
Yes, we're still rocking and rolling.
So, yeah, it was great hearing about that last year, and I've been following it online and following what you guys have been doing. So just for our listeners, so they know a little bit, tell us what the Listen First project is all about.
Absolutely. So Listen First project attempts to aggregate, amplify, and align all of the hundreds, if not thousands, of efforts across the country that try to inspire Americans and provide them the tools and the resources to engage in what we might call difficult conversations with people who don't look like you, they don't come from the same set of life experiences or circumstances that you do, or might have a different political or other kind of perspective or ideology than you. So we try to engage people despite difference to what we might say, turn down the heat, this notion of toxic polarization or affective polarization, where we not only sort of disagree with each other, but if I find out that you are a Democrat and I'm a Republican or vice versa, I don't just disagree, but I distrust and I despise and I dehumanize you. 20% of Republicans and 15% of Democrats say that it'd be okay if someone on the other side of the political spectrum just died. What are we doing as a country when we can't find ways of being in common humanity with each other, finding ways that we are more united than divided, even if we might disagree about how to go about championing or otherwise solving issues? We can generally agree on the principles that unite us. And so what we're trying to do is focus our attention on those things that might describe us as more unified than divided, so that we can work together toward the future that we all want.
Well, that's a great explanation. How did it come about? I don't know if we ever talked about that. I mean, how did it get started in the first place?
So 2013, the founder, Pierce Godwin, was transitioning between time on the Hill, working for Senator Elizabeth Dole. And as he says, he was fired by the American people along with Elizabeth Dole. So he was moving back to North Carolina, his home state of North Carolina, to take a marketing job. And he and his wife, in the interim, took a 6-month mission trip over to Africa. On a bus ride from Uganda, I believe, he was reflecting on his time in Africa with the rich relational resources that are there, but the abject economic poverty, thinking about coming back to a country with so many economic resources, but at the time was in dire relational distress. I mean, it's a quaint time given today's political and social culture, but even then, there was vitriol and distrust and dehumanization, particularly through social media channels. And anyway, he penned this blog post, what he thought, his mom and his grandma might read. And it ended up in 17 newspapers across the country. That was going viral back then. It was picked up by 17 newspapers across the country. And in like any good millennial, he thought, let's do something with this. Let's create a nonprofit and let's do something with this. So between 2013 and 2017, he calls it his Pierce in the Pajamas stage, where he would go to his day job and come home at night and on the weekends, work on Listen First project. And I believe in 2016 or maybe early 2017, he started an MBA program. And when he talked to his colleagues about what he did, no one was really interested in talking to him about his marketing job. Everyone was interested in talking to him about this thing that he called Listen First Project. In August of 2017, Charlottesville happened. And my personal journey to the Listen First Project sort of coincides with that. I was moving from Louisiana to Mississippi to take on a job at a new institution that valued public-facing scholarship. And so I was looking for avenues to take my scholarship to the world to practice. And I stumbled on Listen First Project. Pierce and I had a conversation literally like 2 weeks after Charlottesville and we were strangers and we were sort of at the precipice of tears because of that event, just sort of moved both of us so much. And he's made a commitment to go full time into Listen First Project. And at that point, I made a commitment to serve an advisory role in terms of the messaging about how we might listen across difference and some of the models. And both of us realized the bigness of the field, dialogue, deliberation, and so forth. Me from an academic perspective, knowing a lot of the work had been done, and him from more of a understanding the practitioners that were out there doing this work. And so in 27, we start to build what was called the Listen First Coalition, which started with 4 organizations and is now 350 plus organizations that bring people together despite difference.
And what do you call those organizations? Are they chapters or?
They're members of the Listen First Coalition.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when did you start something that's called America Talks? And I think you had a thing where it was My Country Talks. Is that what it is?
Yeah. So what we try to do is that we try to develop and implement national campaigns and innovations that is kind of the rising tide for all of these organizations. Again, amplifying, aggregating, and aligning all these organizations around a common purpose. And National Week of Conversation, the first one was in 2018. There was a meeting in October, I believe, of 2017, consultant by the name of Cheryl Hughes and a woman by the name of Debbie Lynn Molyneux and several others were basically in a hotel in Chicago. Pierce was there. And one of the ideas that came out of that was, let's have a national day of conversation, a day to celebrate all the work that these organizations are doing. And Pierce was like, I don't have a job. I'll run it. We'll use Listen First Project as the vehicle. And they were like, awesome, go. We did a pilot and we did an event in Charlottesville in 2018 that launched the first National Week of Conversation. And, it was successful. We reached 2 million people. The hashtag, reached 2 million people. We had 132, I think, organizations running events across 32 or 33 states across the country. Boston Public Library was part of it. National League of Women Voters. So some big names were part of it. It got picked up by a couple of news outlets. We called it a success for the first year. And then, so we did that event again in 2019. It was a little bit bigger. We got a spot on Morning Joe. So big national media push got launched and we thought, awesome, a little bit bigger, a little bit better. Year 3, we partnered with Weave, the Social Fabric Project, to do the first themed National Week of Conversation. COVID hit. Mm-hmm. We turned what was supposed to be an event in 2020 into a 9-month campaign that ended up reaching 20 million Americans around the idea that we're basically stronger together, that we can weave community where we are, and that we can see other people as people, not as positions. America Talks was the kickoff event for this year's 2021, the 4th annual National Week of Conversation. We borrowed a platform that was developed in 2016 called My Country Talks. It's based out of Germany. They've run 20 or more events in various European countries. that bring people into one-on-one conversations across some level of difference. Our main difference that we were seeking to bridge people across was a series of questions that started with a widget on our main media partners website, USA Today and the Gannett Network. So if you were on USA Today website and you were reading a news article, you would scroll down and you'd see a question that said, do you approve of the job Joe Biden is doing as president of the United States? And if you clicked yes or no on that question, it sent you to a 6 additional question survey that got your opinion on various topics and issues that are known to divide people between basically Democrat likely or liberal likely and conservative likely positions. And so based on those 7 questions, we then matched people on June the 12th after about a 20-minute video that launched the event that described to people what they were about to be engaged in. We threw people into basically what are breakout rooms through a platform called Junto. And in that room, Graham met Bob. Hey, I'm Graham. I live in Mississippi. Hey, I'm Bob. I don't live in Mississippi. I'm Republican, I'm Democrat, I'm conservative, I'm liberal, whatever the case might be. And there was a guide that guided those people through a conversation, not about how did you answer question 5. It wasn't a debate about HB1. It was just a conversation to figure out who you are, who is Bob Poole, who am I, who is Graham Bodie, what makes me tick, what makes you tick. And then we, at the end of the conversation, answered the question, what goal would you want, Americans to try to achieve? What's your goal for America? What's your hope for America? And that was kind of it. It was an hour. And then we took those individuals as well as anyone else who didn't get a chance to engage in that specific event that weekend, and we introduced them to over 100 different possibilities between June 14th and June 20th that we called National Week of Conversation. And that's when organizations like Braver Angels, Aristotle's Cafe, Living Room Conversations, Crossing Party Lines, Fix Us, Act a Vote, and there were 150 of them, organizations that held one or more events during that week that brought people together to either provide them the tools and the skills and the resources to have more nuanced conversations with people that are different from them, or put them into conversations with people who were probably different.
So what kind of results came out of it? What did people have to say when they met up with people that there was a divide there? And you must have some stories.
Absolutely. Yeah. First of all, you can look at all kinds of, if we were to say this was a successful event, what do we mean by that? Right.
Yeah.
So there are lots of markers of success, and I could take you through a whole slide deck that showed you reach and number of people directly engaged and all that kind of stuff. But really, as you suggest, where the sort of power in a lot of this are those stories. And so we have video testimonials of people saying, I was nervous. I was afraid that I was going to get in there and this person was going to call me names, or otherwise I was going to feel like I was on Facebook, but in front of somebody else. We had 0 instances of trolling. We had 0 instances of, in this case, it would have been Junto bombing, where someone comes to the event in order to disturb or disrupt.
Very good.
We had none of those. And part of that is some of the things and mechanisms that we put in place behind the scenes to make sure that we didn't have those individuals that were simply coming to disrupt or destroy the event. But I also think that we did a good job of recruiting the right kinds of people. So yeah, we had people say that our shared hope for America is that more people will engage, will take that courage and turn our courage, to sort of choose courage over contempt, that more people will feel empowered to share their story and to listen, to be open and listen to the story of someone else, right? So we had people sharing all kinds of powerful testimonials about they're a liberal from California who was paired with a conservative from South Dakota. And they thought, no way am I going to share anything. And the conversation that I was in, the guy was like, oh yeah, I used to live in Gulfport, which is a town in Mississippi just south of where I am. Yeah. And we got to talking about the hurricane that came and literally obliterated Gulfport and how his family was doing and his connections to Oxford, Mississippi. They just found a personal connection, and then talked about the work that he did in Colorado around the struggles that he has trying to have nuanced conversations that he can't find people to do that with. And and providing some resources to him for doing that. But it was those personal connections that were just a theme in these. Like, I didn't think I was going to have anything in common because we aren't the same color. We're not the same gender. Don't live in the same part of the country.
Yeah.
If anybody listening, is reticent about entering a conversation virtually with someone who they never have met before and may never meet again, you're right to be a little scared. It's not a normal experience, but that's part of the point, is to put people in a situation that's outside their comfort zone and show them that it can be a comfortable experience after they engage in that particular conversation.
Yeah. And then we all can share something. We have things that we do share that we can.
We all have something to share, and we all have something, even if it's a small thing, in common.
Yeah. So, again, it's been a year, and maybe you can tell me how you feel about it too. Do you think the divide is greater a year later than it was?
Yeah, it's interesting. If you look at the data, what we saw pre-COVID was more people thought we were more divided than we are united. The toxic or affective polarization was really high. 93% of Americans think it's a problem. The majority of those who think it's a problem want to do something about it. Some of those numbers haven't changed all that much, although what we saw immediately following COVID was a sense of unity. There's some decent data from a group called More in Common that showed that before COVID, the majority of people thought we were more divided than united. Immediately following COVID in April, more people thought we were united than divided.
Okay.
Right. So what we know from national disasters and things that happen to us that are common, like 9/11, like COVID, is that those events have the power to provide us with the mindset that we might sort of be better if we worked together than if we tried to break each other down.
Right.
Unfortunately, events in May of the murder of George Floyd and some of the quote unquote unrest in some of the cities across the country did both of those things. That it provided more sense of unity, but it also, for some individuals and some communities, suggested we were more divided or more different. And I personally think the media had a big role in taking the narrative of George Floyd and exploiting it to further divide us than try to find ways in which we might agree that there are changes that should be made in our country and in our communities. The other interesting thing about that question is that when you ask people about division versus unity at the national level, you get pretty stark levels of toxic polarization. If you tell people to imagine politicians, for instance, you get sort of affective polarization that's 30 points or some crazy number.
Mm-hmm.
But if you ask people about their local communities,
right,
or if you ask people instead about politicians, if you ask people about voters, about people, the number shrinks.
Huh.
So when we're primed with a person, Bob Poole, in front of me right now, regardless of your political identity or affiliation, I have less of a likelihood of having that toxic or affective sort of vitriolic response to people versus abstract positions that I can't see instantiated in a person.
Yep, I get that. That makes sense, total sense. Even personally, I know that from people that that are friends, that we were on the opposite side politically sometimes. But I remember one time this one guy said to me, "I don't know if we can be friends." And I laughed. I said, "We've been friends for 4 or 5 years now. Yeah, we're still going to be friends."
I don't want to lead your listeners on the path of politics is all that we're about. The reason that we framed America Talks largely in the language of political divisions. So there's some work. So Jonathan Guest has done some of this work, and other political scientists have done this work that shows that political affiliation. So there's a survey that just came out. Time Magazine just put out a popular version. You can take this quiz yourself, where they did 3,500 people, and they found that the majority of people, when they did this conjoint analysis, when they were choosing, so you got to choose between these two people, who's more like you. And the list of characteristics had party affiliation, Democrat, Independent, or Republican. It had education, which was high school or college educated. It had race, ethnicity, which included white, black, and Asian. and it had religion, which I think was Muslim, Christian, and atheist. So you imagine all those combinations, and you're choosing between this person and this person 20 different times, right? And then based on your choices, it shows you the percentage of time that you relied on those four categories: party, education, race, ethnicity, and religion. And for most people, party led the way in their choices. In other words, they were choosing the person who was more similar to them. They were choosing, presumably, if they were independent, the independent, Democrat if they were Democrat, Republican if they were Republican. And they also found that Democrats versus Republicans are more likely to choose party over other elements, whereas Republicans are slightly more likely to be influenced by race, ethnicity, and religion, right?
Right.
So there are hundreds of markers of diversity and difference that might define who we are as a person. Or we might try to put those aside for the moment and have a conversation about our shared humanity.
Right.
That's the point of the work of our partner organizations. It's not that party isn't important. It's not that race isn't important. It's not that ethnicity or gender or religion or all these other things that define who we are aren't important, because they do define who we are. They define our life experiences. They might even mean that we come from two different worlds, right? But the point is that even across those differences, whatever they are, right, we can come together, find some common purpose, maybe come to consensus, even if that might not be a necessary outcome. But what is a necessary outcome for all conversations of this type is a greater understanding of the other person, not necessarily their perspectives, although that's important, but particularly them and their story as a person. I might try to get inside their world and their worldview to understand how they might come to the positions they happen to hold.
Right, right. Very well said. Very well said. So the people that attended the National Week of Conversation and took part, what do they do now? Because I'm sure they feel like they're empowered, that they want to go out and do something with this.
Yeah, so we talk about this as a bridging journey, right? And so we believe that every American has the ability to be a bridger. You might call them a listener, a weaver, a healer. We choose to call them a bridger. But every American has the ability to choose bridging as their identity. And so we say we try to be, Listen First Project tries to be agnostic in terms of where you start. So if you want to start by watching a film like The Reunited States of America or Purple, awesome. You should watch that film. And then what do you do after you watch that film? Tell someone else to watch it and have a conversation with them. If you need a facilitator for that, or if you need a guide for that, we can provide that as well. If you want an opportunity to watch that film with other people, there's an opportunity to do that. If your entry point is sitting in a circle with 6 other people telling your story for 2 minutes apiece, do that. If you want to sit in a parallelogram with 8 different people, then you should do that and talk about a specific issue, right? We don't really, maybe it's cursed to say this, we don't care where you start as long as you start, right? And so for those people that started with America Talks or an event in National Week of Conversation, we would say there are tons of other things either with that organization that you happen to engage with. If you love their method and you want to proselytize and you want to tell everybody about it, then please do that. Please be a champion of Living Room Conversations or Crossing Party Lines or one of these other organizations. But if you also want to sort of try other methods and other models, we would encourage you to do that. You can find all of those types of events on the America Talks website. There's a link there that'll put you to basically our common calendar system. It's a website called Citizen Connect, and that is where all of these organizations post their events. You can also follow Listen First Project on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, and we do message out about those events. Or you can sign the Listen First Pledge at listenfirstproject.org/pledge, and that'll put you into our weekly email distribution list where we send you a Friday inspiration. It's called Listen First Friday. We'll send you a weekly inspiration from one of these organizations, and we will every so often inform you about a variety of events that are happening that you can plug into.
So, yeah, America Talks, it's americatalks.us.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, good. We'll put all that information, too, in the show notes, too, so people can find everyone. So Wow. So many things in my head here because I've been really worried about the division this past year. I see too many people that I come in contact with. I'm on different forums, and some of the conversations are just heartbreaking. I mean, what people are willing to say about other people.
And you don't even know them.
No,
right?
I know.
It's some anonymous, person, and so you're behind your keyboard, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to tell you everything that I think about you."
Yeah.
You don't even know them. How can you tell them anything you think about them when you've never thought about them?
Yeah.
I mean, you have no idea who they are.
Yeah, and a lot of these are trolls, I know. But if you look at some of the, the online news organizations or whatever, I mean, some of the comments there are like, it's terrible. It's just terrible. But you're right. The media does seem to inflame this. I mean, the power of words. And when you have headlines that use superlative adjectives for everything, everything's a major, major crisis. And then you realize it's nothing at all that they're talking about.
No, it was just clickbait to get you to go to that.
Yeah. So, I think they do help or hinder the coming together.
And that's why we really sort of were blessed to find a partner in USA Today. They are, if you look at their readership, they are balanced across political ideology, very, very balanced across political ideology. And they have a mission to combat toxic polarization, both by helping us and our partner organizations convene conversations despite difference, but also to fight misinformation, which is a huge part of this problem. I mean, there's lots of pieces to the toxic polarization puzzle: echo chambers, social media, misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy theories, living in neighborhoods that are segregated by all kinds of different variables, the decline of social groups, including church attendance. I mean, there's all these things that contribute to the kind of society that we live in now versus the kind of society that we could live in now. Don't hear me pointing to some glory days where we were all united and loved each other. That day doesn't exist. There's no day in the past where we were all united around a common purpose, at least not all of us. And so that's not the point. The point is that there is, however, promise in the idea of America, broadly speaking, that has never been fulfilled for everyone at all times, for all people, right? And that's what we think a piece of that puzzle is: engaging in difficult conversations, getting to the root causes of our conflict, getting to the root causes of our disagreements, coming to some understanding and some shared perspective taking of the other, whoever that other is for you or for me. And then sort of being willing to say, I might be wrong. All of my thoughts and my perspectives could be completely wrong. And that would be okay. And I might learn a little bit by talking to someone who also thinks that they might be wrong in some ways.
What came out of the conversations, if there was one or two or three themes where both parties agreed upon? Did anything like that happen? Like, all politicians are crooks, or whatever. I mean, I can see that conversation going on, but was there one or two themes that these disparate parties said after they were done, wow, we agreed on this?
One thing that we heard and that we read in the comments was the power of these conversations for changing someone's mindset or perspective about what they can do individually to help solve or correct toxic polarization, right? So, you're concerned about toxic polarization, and you're very much like the other 93% of Americans that are also concerned about it. And then the question is, what are you doing about it, right? The brave Americans that showed up for America Talks and National Week of Conversation are doing something about it, right? And so the first thing is that people are realizing that they can do something about it, right? The second thing that came out, I think, is that people realize that some national level bridge building campaign is only as good as it is manifest in local communities, right? So these people came away from this conversation saying that they needed to be speaking to their neighbors, their coworkers, and their other community members about in a similar manner. So imagine many America Talks, right? And Oxford Talks, a Minneapolis Talks, a Los Angeles Talks, a area code 10373 Talks, whatever, right? That we need to take this sort of what we're doing at the national level, and we need to take it locally. So people realize the power of those local conversations, that you don't build community from the top down, you build community from the bottom up. And so I think those were two big themes. And then, of course, we heard people over and over again say that what I said earlier, that their fears of not finding anything in common with this other person did not manifest, that it wasn't as scary as it sounded, that it wasn't as uncomfortable as they thought it could have been, but they found sort of a greater understanding of the other person, but also a greater understanding of themselves.
What percentage of the people said they would do it again?
Over 90.
Okay. Yeah. I figured it had to be high.
Yeah. We had a net promoter score of like 60. It was crazy. Like 90, if you know that, right? Net promoter score is a 0 to 10. Like 90% of people selected 8 or above.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's great. That's really good. So how do you get it down to this local level? I mean, I hear what you're saying, and it'd be great. So we want to have let's talk here in Percy, Pennsylvania. How do you get it here? Do I organize that? Is that how it works? You got to have someone who's willing to.
Yeah, I mean, in diffusion of innovations, who's your opinion leader? Find them, plug in, convince them that this is something to do. So if you're more conservative minded, find out someone that's more liberal minded, and you invite 3 people, they invite 3 people, you've got the first event, right? Find your local newspaper, radio station, blogger, whatever, have them write about it. We, at this point, have the technology, have the solution, have the partners that will help you facilitate those conversations. So if you want to run an event where you are, reach out to us and we'll reach out to our partner organizations and we'll make that happen.
Okay, there. Very good. Let's hope we can get some people to do that.
I hope so.
So what's next? What's the future hold?
Well, what's next immediately is in 18 minutes, I'm going to go to an event called the Partnership for American Democracy, which is a large consortium of organizations and coalitions that are seeking a different way to encourage people to participate in various ways in the democratic reform, from getting people concerned about voting rights all the way to getting people into conversation with each other despite difference. So it's a bunch of organizations, like 50 or 60 organizations and coalitions. So that's immediate. What's going to happen, hopefully beginning in the fall, is that we're going to start convening a series of events that we're calling Meeting of America. And very similar to America Talks, we're trying to bring people into small group or one-on-one conversations with people to connect despite difference, but not just to connect. We're looking also at different models of deliberative democracy so that people feel like at the end of that journey, let's say next winter, January, February, March, leading to National Week of Conversation 2022, that we can convene a series of events where people take an issue that's important in their local community and they debate it out and they have cordial and productive conversations about that issue. And then they agree amongst themselves what they're going to do about that issue or that problem in their local community. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking forward to in the very immediate and kind of near future opportunities. And then, of course, anytime anybody's interested, you can go to citizenconnect.us. If you can't remember all those, it's always listenfirstproject.org, and we've got all those links on our website. You can look for opportunities to be a bridger.
Fantastic. With that, thank you for being here again.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure, Bob.
We'll have to reconvene in a year.
In another year, right?
Yeah, and see how things go. How's that sound?
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you for being here with us today at the Water Cooler Hangout. If you'd like to learn more about the things we talked about, you can read the show notes by going to www.bobpoole.com/podcast. That's www.bobpoole.com/podcast with an S. Take care, and don't forget, listen first and sell later.